We will start today with Daniel talking through one of the issues that they're having with hypotheses, theories, lemmas, and theorems. Daniel, are you there?
I'm here, but I didn't know how the session would go, so I haven't really prepared much. I was glad to see that other proposals have been put into the Etherpad, and I can give a walkthrough in terms of the hypothesis and things like that. The main reason why I put it in is I wanted to have some scientific content in those modeling clinics, and I'm working on all of the things that are mentioned in the session proposal. I'm in contact with people who are working with this on a like more daily basis, and they come to me and ask, okay, how many of our hypotheses, theories, lemmas, and other kind of structures, scientific structures can we get, or algorithms, how many of those can we get into Wikidata? How do we do it best? And so that's why I proposed this as a community session. Unfortunately, none of those people can actually attend now. And so I'm here, I can give you that spiel, but on the other hand, I'm also interested in others on the wiki end who would be interested in modeling that. And I think we can use the synchronous time that we have to actually work on the problems that people have proposed who are actually here. And so I can take it either way. I can give you a little bit of examples from those things that I mentioned, or we can start with those things that the others have proposed. I'm fine either way.
Well, once you've got started, you might as well talk us through some examples and see if there's anyone here that can help you out.
Okay, so for that, I will try to share my screen. And then let's see how that works. Okay, I think I'm sharing my screen now. And so what I'm showing now is a Wikibase instance, Wikibase Cloud, that we're using to study basically the modeling of hypotheses. So you see here, can you see that? Can someone confirm that you actually can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so here we are trying to split hairs in a certain way. So this is an item that is for the definition of a hypothesis. So this is an instance of a definition of a hypothesis, which is separate from the hypothesis. We have a separate item for the hypothesis, here, for instance. And this hypothesis is described as an instance of a hypothesis. It's studied by certain fields. It has an abbreviation, has a definition. And yeah, here some sort of a status in terms of how mature this particular item is for review. But the problem is this concept enemy release hypothesis is used in a very broad sense in the literature. And so we have items that are more specific. They are for particular formulations of that particular hypothesis. And the question is whether Wikidata is ready to have multiple examples of those. And also, there are different ways to model hypotheses. There are, so for instance, you could model them in terms of whether they are causal hypotheses in the sense that they express a relationship between two things where one causes the other. Then here, if you have something like a hypothesis type, you could have further statements on the structure of the hypothesis. So here, for instance, we express that structure as a triple consisting of a subject, an object, and a relationship between them. And within that context, the subject would be the similarity to a native species. We're in invasion biology, which deals with species that are either in the place where they are supposed to be, like in which is their native environment, or they're not. They are in an exotic or a foreign or an alien space, and so they're an alien species, and they have invaded that space. So the object here would be, for instance, invasion success, because that hypothesis says something about the invasion success. And then the relationship between the subject and the object would be subject negatively affects object, right? And so in that particular Wikibase instance, you see this is item Q153. We have on the order of 100 similar such things, which are essentially just different ways to explore how hypothesis could be modeled in the context of invasion biology. And I have a similar Wikibase instance for mathematical structures like lemmas and so on. I haven't actually prepared this right now. And so the question is whether anyone is interested in digging deeper into that, whether you could imagine using this kind of structure here on Wikidata, whether you're aware of something that is already in use or that is maybe better, things like that. And once we're done with the hypothesis, we can go into lots of the other structures, because lemmata and conjectures and theorems, they are very similar to hypothesis. And I don't mind where we start, but I would like to have some of those in Wikidata, because that would then allow us to link this to the literature, so that you can then ask questions. Give me all the papers that deal with hypothesis X, or that deal with this component of hypothesis X. So for instance, here, the invasion biology, or that deal with relationships between parts of components, where the relationship is subject negatively affects object, and so on. So I think that's maybe good enough as an introduction, and we can dive deeper into any of that. Lydia wants to talk. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for showing that. And since we intend these clinics also to be for people who are new to data modeling and Wikidata, I think one thing to call out, which is really great, is that you're doing this on Wikibase Cloud, right? Where you can play around with it, figure out how you want to model that data. So if anyone here or listening to this recording later isn't sure how to model things on Wikidata and is afraid of breaking something, go to Wikibase Cloud, set up your own wiki and go wild. You can't break anything. And it's a very nice way to show other people then how it could be, so that they can give you feedback on your modeling.
Yeah, I see here in the comments, Skyperson asked whether I'm aware of the disk work. Yes, I am. I also know Yolanda, and I have pinged her on this, but she hasn't replied. So for the moment, we're doing this not without feedbacks. There are some people who are more involved in like formal ontology development than I am, and I'm in contact with them. And for the case of invasion biology, we are looking at this together. But for some of the others, like theorems, conjectures, and so on, in mathematics, I'm not directly tied to people who are working on this. But for algorithms, for instance, I am. And so it's a bit of a mix. And I'm happy to start on any of those ends. And I'm particularly interested in like meeting people who are happy to work on this on the wiki end, because I am in contact with the people who work on this from a scientific end.
I think Peter has would like to speak. Peter, you have your hand up. Is there something you'd like to ask?
Unmute. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So Lydia, you said to set up Wikidata yourself, but that ends up with an empty Wikidata, right?
Yes. So an empty Wikibase. Yes. So right now on Wikibase, you get an empty Wikibase, but as far as I know, the team working on that is working on improving that. And maybe some of the people on the team who are here in the room want to talk more about this, if they're not too shy.
And while these people are thinking whether they should talk, maybe I should mention, so Lydia said you can use Wikibase Cloud. I'm actually not aware whether anybody can by now use Wikibase Cloud. I think it's still somewhat in the beta thing. Or
it is in beta, but you can sign up now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, my question is because I would like to figure out how to fix up diseases, which is an important part of Wikidata and is quite a mess. I mean, a real mess. But there's like millions of diseases. And so any solution has to be tested out on those. Well, at least there's hundreds of thousands. I think there's millions of diseases. Has to be tested out on the existing data.
Yeah, it's certainly not a solution for everything, and especially something as complex as that, right?
I mean, yeah, Wikidata is at the point where just about any area that one would like to model, there's significant existing data.
Yeah, but Wikibase Cloud could give you a nice way of, hey, how about we do it this way, right? For a smaller sample of that.
Yeah, except again, just to pick on diseases again, there are so many of them that any solution, you have to figure out whether you can fix or modify the existing data to fit the new solution.
Yeah, to follow up on what Peter just said, I have here a little query that gives me kind of an overview of the data model. So I'll share the link in the chat, and then I'll explain what that query does. Or for people, some people already understand it from just reading. So here it searches for things that are instances of disease, and then it basically checks for all the claims that are on this particular items that meet this criterion, and then they check which properties are used on the in the statements on this item, and then of which type is the value for that particular property, and then it counts basically, right? And so we, for all the instances of disease, we have, of course, instance of statements, 3,565. We also have subclass of statements on the same item, and it's almost the same number. Then we have some identifiers and, for instance, statements about health specialty, 1,200, and so on. And so with queries like this, you can at least get a rough overview of what is already being used. And then from there, one could go and examine some of those. So here I have the same query, for instance, for lemmas, yeah, you can use anything. Originally, I wrote it for bus stops when I want to understand how bus stops are modeled.
Yeah, you should put subclasses of disease as well, because disease is a heavily subclass class.
I know, but then it gets more complex, and I wanted to start with a more simple query. Not everybody here is fully equipped with Sparkle, and so we can go step by step.
It's a deep subclass as well, so you need the star, and then I expect
Yes, I will do that next step. Just let's go step by step so that people who are not writing Sparkle queries every day can have a certain chance of following. And you see already it's taking a while, and so it's quite possible that this query will then time out, which would then lead to like the usual scaling issue discussion. Okay, so here we see now that we include subclass statements, subclass actually is winning against instance of, but they're still essentially the same number. And we have a few other things that pop out, like exact match that wasn't so prominent before. And now we can try to rerun this with the star, which will then basically walk along the graph for anything that is a subclass of a subclass of a subclass of disease. And while we're doing this, we can also do something similar with symptoms or with therapies and things like that. It probably doesn't make too much sense to just take the diseases because some of the other things are closely related to it. And also the modeling problem that we have instance of and subclass of used on all these items is not specific to diseases. Because in some parts of Wikidata, people just couldn't decide what is the better way to model it. And so just to be sure and to allow querying by instance of or subclass of, I just put both, which isn't really nice, but at least it works for on the short term. So this one times out for me. And so we would then need to simplify the query somehow, put a limit here or so. I'll leave that for now.
Sorry to cut you off there, Daniel. Thank you so much for talking us through your modeling issue. We just got to make some time for some of the other people that have put some things into the Etherpad. If you don't mind moving along.
Sure.
And if people wanted to connect, they know what your username is, and they can connect with you after if they like. Next up, we have, sorry, I'm trying to get to the Etherpad. We have AAP 1890. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. And if you're in the call, would you like to, Alex, would you like to introduce your topic?
Thank you so much. I'm Alex. I think I put this in the Etherpad, but I am adding some items for publication by a couple of art historians I study. Yeah, so my issue is that some of them are unsigned, or I don't know how they signed them. And that's something I'm very interested in. And so I know that I have the wrong qualifier right now. It should be object named as, so I'll fix that. But for now, I'm wondering what people think about how to model this kind of blank value. So that's my problem. And I have a link to a couple of Sparkle queries that will show you like some example items if that's helpful.
And you already called out possible solutions. We're setting it to unknown value, which Wiki Project Some of Our Paintings does. Is there a good reason not to do that for you? Or did you run into any issues?
I actually don't know how to do that, so that's one barrier for me. But oh, okay, I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's. I've been watching people do that, but let's see if I can figure it out. Here. Okay. Was it that you should share the whole window? Was that the?
That would be ideal.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you seeing my query result?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. So yeah, this is what I did. So yikes. And I'll change that. But yeah, so I guess I
if
can
you click
change.
edit there, exactly. And then the 3 squares before the unsigned, if you click on that.
Oh, great. Okay.
There you go.
Is there, I guess, like, what would people recommend between no value and unknown value?
So no value is for, we know that there is no one who wrote this book, for example, like not an actual example. You use no value, for example, you know that this person didn't have a child. And you use unknown value when you know that the person had a child, but you don't know who the child is.
Okay, great. So both of those I think will work for my case because I have a couple here where I have to check how they signed their work. So
cool.
Okay, yeah, and I guess just the difference there is like I think in the Some of All Paintings, like this position would be the no value or something, and then so it's just kind of swapped. So I guess I got confused, but that answers my question. So
great.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Wow, great. And next on the list, oh my God, sorry, I closed the, excuse me. Lydia, do you want to introduce the next one?
Sure. The next one is around Indigenous people. Frederick, I think this is you, right? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. So modeling of indigenous people, we have very clear use cases in which we actually want to be querying this data and we're using it outside of Wikidata. But besides completion issues, the modeling of indigenous people make it quite challenging to write queries that will not time out because we see a mix of relationships being subclasses of and others being part of. At a high level, it starts with subclass, and the more you go down, the more you have a mix of both of them, and that makes queries very difficult. I've been trying to wrap my head about this one. Subclasses is very easy for named entities such as buildings, for example, where it's fairly straight. If a given building is instantiated as a subclass of something, then it is therefore a subclass of the parent class, and so on. But when it comes to concepts like ethnic groups that would normally not be stated using P31, is really subclass the best route, or is part of the best approach? And I have no solution. I'm looking for guidance.
That is a tricky problem. Does anyone have some input on that?
This is Jackie.
Hi.
So the part of is this you're thinking in terms of physical construct of the entity, or a philosophical, a abstract construct?
It is both in this case, because you have groups like the Anishinaabe or the Chippewa who would somehow relate to the class indigenous groups, indigenous peoples of North America, that then relates to the larger class indigenous peoples. So it is both a philosophical concept in that these different ethnic groups understand that they are related to one another, they recognize themselves as such, but it is also a physical concept in that you can actually add physical human beings that claim an identity to either of these groups.
Yeah, I think we are having a similar conundrum as well. Over time, their people groups could be part of another subgroup. I think we have used primarily part of, but also if the subclass is available, we also make sure that statement is added because we wanted to make sure people can find them either way. I think we're coming from the user side to think about how they would go about trying to connect the two and show their relationship. It's in a way tedious for the data specialist. You had to think through the process, and oftentimes we are used to providing duplication so that to ensure the end user get to where we want them to get to. But is this a good data model? I'm not sure.
Sky, do you have input on it, maybe?
Yeah, so I'm also interested in this. I'm doing work mostly in the area of indigenous groups as sovereign nation states. So items that describe them as nation states with treaty relationships and all of those kinds of things with the United States or other countries. I think there's kind of two different things maybe that you're getting at that I think are more subclasses of a part of type of relationship. There's an ethnic identity aspect, and there's also a citizenship aspect if we're actually describing real people, and those are two different things. And I don't think that the basic classification of part of or has part really works for that. Those are kind of different sorts of properties, and I really haven't looked from that perspective to see what Wikidata has, if those concepts are really adequately described there. But I think we do need something specific for this because it's not the same kind of part of relationship that lots of other things have. I think it would need to be something beyond that. And I do think we need to distinguish between ethnic relationships and, organizational entity relationships or nation state types of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the property ethnic group, as we ran consultations with indigenous people themselves, they told us that they didn't relate to this property. Other wording, such as is being used by Statistics Canada, referring to ethnic or cultural origin. The word origin makes more meaning for them. But I want to stay focused on the question at hand there. Yes, I guess we could create a brand new relationship property, but that's a long process, and I'm sure there's got to be a way out with the existing resources. You know, is part of a transitive property in the same fashion that subclass is, and could this be used as input to make a decision? In the particular case of the Anishinaabe people and other um, nations that or people that are considered part of the First Nations in Canada, there's also an epistemological aspect to it, in that the grouping of First Nations was a colonial invention that was imposed on these peoples. And so there could be a rightly case to make to use part of when relating to First Nations, and subclass of when relating to Indigenous people of Canada.
Hi Mensch Banz, wer redet denn da so am Freitagabend über sowas? Und ich schön zu.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so it seems like there's quite some more work to be done in this area, and at the same time there are people who are interested in solving it, so here in the room. So maybe this is the start of forming a little group that digs into this more.
Absolutely. We have a wiki project for Indigenous peoples of North America that has been somewhat dormant, that I would be happy to reactivate. And by the way, pings to this group no longer work. I don't know how that is even possible, but anyways, can't ping it.
It could be because you have too many people in the project.
No, it's a small one.
Hmm.
Anyways, that's another story. Let's not waste time on this. But if you are interested, let me know in the chat and we'll get together.
Yeah. So you have a few people already here, and you were talking about Wiki Project, Indigenous people in North America, if I understood it correctly. And there are groups who are working on Indigenous groups in other areas. So maybe that's also worth connecting. Maybe Susanna, for example, has some pointers for that.
And you can add the link to the project in the chat and the Etherpad as well.
Yeah.
Be helpful for everyone to find.
Great. All right. We have another one from Andy. Shall we get to that one? Andy,
do you want me to read it?
Yes, please do.
So I recently read, or rather came across, I didn't actually read all of it, an academic paper about spiders that live by eating wood lice, or some of you may know them as pill bugs. I'm sorry to anybody who's eating their meal while they're following this presentation. And that is called Oniscophagi. Probably not pronounced that correctly, because wood lice or pill bugs are the Oniscodea in taxonomy, and a phage is something that eats something. So things that have oniscophagy as part of their life cycle are called an oniscophage, an organism that eats wood lice. And there are lots of other types of phages. In the Etherpad, you can see somebody else has mentioned necrophage, which is eating dead things. And there are many, many more besides. So I thought, well, I'll start to model all these different types of phages and phages in Wikidata, and immediately ran into a couple of problems. Perhaps I should share my screen. Just bear with me a moment. I'll see if I can do that.
Sounds good. And Jan was saying we get a bit of feedback from you. I don't know if there's anything.
I have headphones on, so you shouldn't be able to hear me.
We can hear you, but there's just a bit.
I mean, you shouldn't be able to hear me twice, is what I mean. Yes, you should be able to hear me. Otherwise, I'll be wasting my time.
We can hear you.
I can't see where I share my screen.
It should be.
Oh yes, no, I've got it.
Good. Okay.
If I go back a couple of windows. So here is the phage. This is the act or the process or the lifestyle of eating a particular thing. And I've said it is practiced by an oniscophage, which is the organism that does this thing. And I have a constraint error, which says that the oniscophage should have the inverse statement, field of this occupation. Well, of course, it's not an occupation. It's a facet of a living thing's lifestyle. So do we need to change the constraint, or is there a better property than practiced by, or do we need to use some other sort of value? And how on the item for Oniscoidea, the actual taxon for woodlice, you can see that word here, how do we say these are typically eaten by, and then refer to oniscophages? And I don't know, and I haven't found an example. Somebody in the chat, if I switch back to the Etherpad rather, has very kindly provided this other example, necrophage and necrophagia. So I made some changes to how both of these items, the oniscophagia and oniscophage, which I'll now switch to, I changed that to be a subclass of zoophage instead of a subclass of organism, which is more precise and puts it into a nice hierarchy. But I still don't know how to model the other parts of, or facets of this, which I've already mentioned. Again, you see here, main food source is Oniscoidea, which is woodlice or pillbugs, and I have a constraint error there. And the constraint there, well, says that things that are a food source should have a statement, taxon name and parent taxon. Well, this isn't a taxon, so it won't have a parent taxon or a taxon name.
Yeah. Does anyone have input on this or good ideas for properties to use? And Peter is saying the description of practice by indicates that this is the wrong property. Also, as with many Wikidata properties, the situation is not clear. Sky says, I think there's a TDWG working group. This is working on the formal ontology that will describe the properties and classification for biological processes. And Peter, do you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think this is an example. Another one of my pet peeves in Wikidata is you really can't use anything in Wikidata by only looking at the name. You have to look at the description, and ideally the description in multiple languages, so you get some notion of what people meant when they were creating the thing. And so practice by sounds good, but when you look at the page for practice by, it says type of agents that study this subject or work in this field. And that's not eating.
Yeah. And Daniel says he's very interested in modeling interactions between taxa. So maybe you can hash out a new property together.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And regarding the definition of the property, mea culpa, I didn't read it. I assumed it based on previous experience of it. But I think it's fair to say that that's something a lot of people will do. And so perhaps we need something that when you use a property, pops up the definition and says, is this what you meant? Or, you know, this isn't usually used here, before you save it, rather than just popping up a constraint report afterwards.
Yeah, and that's also part of what Autofix should do, right? Where it is possible, that we were talking about earlier today.
Yes, unfortunately, I missed that session. I have some concerns about that because sometimes it is the constraints that are wrong and not the data. I'll give an example of that, which is I recently found out there's a human being who has an ISBN. And of course, that throws up a constraint report, but it's not wrong.
Yeah.
She has the ISBN, she's registered it, she's an ISBN issuing agent, she's an artist, and she actually has it tattooed on her body.
Nice.
Okay, so you can never rely 100% on existing constraints.
Right. Autofix doesn't even, so that's good. But yes, you're totally right. There are exceptions to constraints.
Should we move on to the next one? Thank you so much, Andy. We have Seal next. I believe, hopefully that is pronounced correctly.
You're one of the few that pronounces it correctly at first attempt. Thank you so much.
God. I was very nervous.
Don't be. I have a question. I mapped out after, by example of some of our paintings, I've done mapping on witches, and after that on sexual and reproductive rights items. And I see people being confused because actually, where's the screen share button?
It's the third in the bar at the bottom.
Yes, great. Thank you. This one. So this is me mapping out a area I work in with the main sections and the subclasses, and just making sure that I also understand what are the differences, because there are a lot of items and also a lot of Wikipedia articles about sexual and reproductive rights. Some are about sexual health, some are about reproductive health. So it's all, I had to write this down like this. And we worked on this and improved this back in 2021, and we had to go back in 2023 and make sure to restore this mapping, because my question is, how do I make others aware that there is a mapping like this, so they don't unintentionally destroy, quote unquote, destroy our work, just, with all good intentions, do a difference. So we use different from. This is different from all the other items, and it does not help. I just, per the discussion in the Etherpad, also now added the wiki project Women's Health that is now starting up. But it's still difficult. How do I make others aware of a mapping that has been done and that is around? How do I call their attention to that?
That is a very good question, and I'm sure you're not the only one with this problem.
But like we cannot add a template as we do on Wikipedia, or that doesn't work. How do we?
So one of the.
May I interject?
Yes, please.
As I said on the Etherpad, there are two properties, P5008 on focus list of Wikimedia project and P6104 maintained by Wiki project. There was some discussion, incidentally, of merging those two properties, but they flag up that one or more wiki projects has interest in an item, and they tell the informed user that there may be some documentation on the project page about how the item is modeled or how it can be worked on, or what else might be relevant to it. Unfortunately, they don't really flag that up to people who aren't aware of what those things mean. But at least that's the first.
Especially if people think that a Wikipedia article is wrongly connected and needs to be assigned to a different item, they will change the Wikipedia link and not scroll down the list of properties that are in the item. So it's I'm not sure if that's a solution. I'm definitely going to add.
I'm not suggesting it's
P.
solution.
Yeah,
I'm suggesting
okay.
it's a first step towards a solution. Because if you don't make those links, even the informed Wikidata editors won't find the connection.
Yeah, so that is one, and there's also more discussion in the chat where Daniel mentioned links to a discussion around these two properties, and maybe it doesn't make sense to have both of them.
Yeah, well, I think it could make sense if they were applied consistently, but they are not. So one of them is, I actually don't have the names at hand right now, but one of them kind of implies the presence of a list, but is often used when the list is not present. And so, yeah, I'm now on this thing. One is on focus list of Wikimedia project, P5008. But it is used in many circumstances where there is no such list. And the other one is maintained by Wiki project. And the question is, what does maintenance mean? And so I think these two, they're both used at rather large scales. And I've given here in this discussion some more examples. There are also some Wiki projects which have statements of both of them. And it's very hard to make sense of that if we don't have any sort of consistency. And that basically leads to something else that's not strictly data modeling, but we don't really have good decision processes for these kind of things. Once it goes beyond individual like wiki projects or so, yeah, we're a bit hesitant to actually take decisions. And so these things, they linger around, they accumulate gravity, and we don't move on. We don't solve these problems. So I would really encourage people to give another thought to this. Maybe we can think about doing a session on this. I would really be keen to come up with a solution to which way we should be using to tag wiki projects. And maybe we need these two, maybe we need 3 or 4, I don't know. But some consistency would actually be nice.
Thank you, Daniel. Another thing that this closely ties into was this whole work of how can we make wiki projects more visible, right? And we have some designs and ideas, and now it needs someone to start prototyping that with a gadget. And we even have a ticket for it. Maybe, Ariane, you can find it. That would hopefully help to make wiki projects based on the statements that we talked about more visible to people, so that they know, hey, this is where someone discussed how to model these items, and has some more documentation about it, for example. Yeah. Jan was also suggesting the property for linking to a model item for a class. I'm not entirely sure if that helps in your particular case, but it's definitely useful.
Yeah, I'm not sure if a property item would be the solution. I'd rather have something in the top. So either a template on the discussion page, you know, that you notice that this discussion page is blue, or something that at least calls their attention, or an edit notice, you know, something like that. Are you sure you want to change this because there has been thought and and blood, sweat and tears in the mapping of this item? Are you sure you want to change this particular part? Please read the documentation, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion also. And Jan is asking if you want to semi-protect the entire item, maybe even?
Well, that's not the same thing as an edit notice. You can just, on Wikipedia, you can just add an edit notice for everyone that edits, at least in Wikicode. So maybe semi-protect is a next level.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that agrees with Wikidata.
Yeah. I mean, if it's really bad, that is a step, depending on how much people mess things up and how often.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know, at least. Yeah.
Andrew is asking, how much will Shex help in the future? It should help with checking that what we have is according to the schema we have, but I'm not sure that is exactly the problem you're having, right? Like you want to step before that. You don't want people to change something without thinking about it.
Well, I want them to be aware of it. You know, it's okay if you disagree, but please, like, join the discussion and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. That was a really interesting topic. Sorry, go ahead, Lydia.
It is a very interesting topic. And Jan got sidetracked. How does one add an edit notice to an individual article on Wikipedia? That's a very good question.
An admin can do that. We at least I've done so on Meta for certain pages.
Maybe
Yeah.
you'll have some links that we could look at and see if that is in any way transferable to items on Wikidata.
Let me see if I can grab a link for you.
Cool.
Found one. I'll share it with you in the chat. If you click on the page, you'll see a big light red field in the top that warns you, or at least it says, "Attention users, we're requesting a new campaign." So yeah, still not everyone sees it, but it's at least it's an attempt to make people aware of stuff.
Okay, that's worth looking into.
So yeah, I think it's admin. Admins can do that, Jan. Because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. I don't think normal users without admin rights can do it, but admins can.
We can look into how exactly it works. And I don't think it's one-on-one transferable to items on Wikidata, but there's some ideas in there that maybe we can explore.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. We are also almost at time. We have a bunch more in the Etherpad. I fear we will not get to it in this session anymore. But maybe people can look at the remaining modeling challenges in the Etherpad and add some comments and support. We also have another clinic tomorrow, and maybe we can have another look at the remaining ones there as well. Ariane, do you have any last things to add?
Nothing from me. Thank you all for participating. It's been a really great session. Been really enjoying these clinics. So it's great to be involved. I believe the next session is live editing schema session. So that is coming up in 11 minutes. Thank you all. I'll see you all then.
1 hour and 11 minutes, I think.
1 hour, 11 minutes, excuse me.
Yes.
I got a break, that's nice.
So yeah, everyone have a well-deserved break and see you later again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.